Hello, history lovers! We're finally finishing up the Wives of Henry VIII series. I know I got distracted from that talking about other topics, but that's the thing about being a history lover. There are so many topics to cover that even if I did a video a day, I wouldn't cover half of what there is to talk about. But we're finally getting on with the final wife of Henry VIII, and that's Catherine Parr, who is, even though she did so much more, she's mainly just known for being the wife that outlived Henry.
Catherine Parr, she was lost. By then all my best days were past. I lay on my deathbed aged just 55. Lucky Catherine, the last stayed alive.
Actually, Anne of Cleves also outlived Henry, but they were already divorced, so people don't really tend to talk about her being one of the wives that outlived him. They just think of Catherine Parr in that role. And it's odd that she's only thought of in that way because out of all of Henry's wives, Catherine Parr probably had the most going on outside of being married to him, and was the only one of his wives to have had other marriages. She was actually married twice before she ever met Henry. Now, her mother was able to give her a very, very good education. She was educated as well as any young man at the time would have been, but it was still seen as only being in preparation for marriage because, let's face it, what was a woman at the time going to do if she didn't get married? So, Catherine was married very young. At the age of 17 was when she was um, was joined to her first husband.
When Catherine was 17, Maud arranged her marriage to Sir Edward Berg, the 21-year-old son of Baron Berg. Earlier biographies have confused Catherine's first husband with his father, who was also named Edward. Thus, it has traditionally been supposed that Catherine's first marriage was to a much older man.
Catherine's mother, Maud, saw to it that she was well prepared for marriage, and she married young, so you might think, oh, this marriage is going to last a while. No. Her husband died only 4 years into the marriage. And of course, what was a woman to do at that time but get married again?
Only a year later, the widowed Catherine, who was still a young woman at 21, married John Neville, 3rd Baron Latimer, a man more than twice her age.
Now, it's pretty gross to think of her marrying someone twice her age, but this marriage definitely had some advantages. Her husband had quite a bit of influence, especially in northern England, and she got two stepkids out of the marriage who she was close to. But there was one major drawback to this marriage. In England at this time, it was not safe to be Catholic. Henry VIII, remember, broke away from the Catholic Church in order to marry Anne Boleyn. Now, Catherine's new husband was a strong supporter of the Catholic Church and Henry's first wife, Catherine of Aragon, who was actually godmother to Catherine Parr. So, strong Catholic ties going on here. Not good in Henry VIII's world. To make matters even more fun, there was a Catholic uprising at the time. This is known today as the Pilgrimage of Grace. And it was basically a Catholic rebellion against Henry, and they grabbed Catherine's new husband and said, "You support us Catholics, right? You're coming with us."
It is unclear just how much the rebels had to twist Lord Latimer's arm to persuade him to join their cause, but some sources claim he quite publicly embraced it.
Even though Catherine's husband was very pro-Catholic, that doesn't mean necessarily that she was. In fact, she and her stepchildren were actually locked up in their own house while this was going on. Now, was that to ensure her husband's cooperation? Was that to give him an excuse after the rebellion ended, if it was to fail, where he could say, "Oh, I only joined in because they had my wife and kids hostage"? Did he actively oppose them? We don't know. That's all speculation. We do know, however, that she was very, very pro-Protestant in her views. Well, her husband grew sick, and after about a year of nursing him, he passed away. So, Catherine was now free to marry whoever she wanted. She was extremely rich from both marriages. She had a title as Lady Latimer. She was free, she could have her pick of whoever she wanted. And she wanted Thomas Seymour, who was the brother of Henry's third wife, Jane Seymour. Unfortunately, or you might actually think fortunately once you learn a little more about Thomas Seymour, but Henry had his eye on Catherine and sent Thomas out of the country on some important business. Purely coincidental, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, anyway, with Thomas out of the picture, Henry proposed to Catherine. Well, he's the King of England. Are you going to refuse him back then? Of course not. She didn't really have a choice. But there are some historians who say she might have had her own agenda in agreeing to marry him.
Some of her biographers believe that she accepted Henry's proposal as part of a religious mission to facilitate the advance of reform in England by being a subtle but committed advocate for Protestant values.
By this time, Henry really needed a nurse and just basically someone to be a friend to him more than he really needed a wife in the romantic sense. He's looking for more of a friend at this point, I guess you'd say, although his lust certainly, I'm sure, never decreased. But Catherine begins to take care of him. He's had an ulcer on his leg for years that is incredibly painful for him. Constantly infected. It said that you could smell him rooms away. It was so badly infected. So Catherine starts to look after him the way she'd once looked after a sick husband before. Takes on the role of nursing him, and as she takes care of him, she starts to talk with him and to debate him.
And it is here, in these quiet, scholarly moments, in the intimacy of the royal apartments, that she makes a near fatal mistake. She is a true believer, a committed but secret Protestant, a patron and protector of the new faith. Her chambers have become a quiet hub for reformist thinkers, a safe harbor in the stormy sea of Henry's court. And in her passion for her faith, in her genuine belief that she can guide her husband towards a pure understanding of God's word, she begins to argue. She debates. She lectures. She begins with the earnest conviction of a true believer to school the supreme head of the Church of England on the finer points of his own doctrine.
Now, you might think being Protestant would be a good thing, right? Because Henry's certainly not Catholic. In fact, Catherine and her last husband were lucky they avoided getting in trouble for being connected to the rebellion before. They were able to claim, oh, it was all under duress, he was forced into it. So, luckily, they got away with that, and Catherine wasn't in danger at that point. But now here's the dangerous part. Yes, Henry considers being Catholic bad. He dissolved monasteries. Catholic priests were killed. Nuns were killed. Anybody who opposed leaving the Catholic Church was in extreme danger. But Henry, in practice, didn't change much more than declaring himself head of the church. He didn't really want to reform things all that much as far as how the religion was run. Catherine was saying, let's take a look at what scriptures actually mean. Let's change things up a bit. Is this really what the Bible is saying? Maybe we can change things even more than just making you head of the church. Maybe we can start something that's a lot purer than what we ever had. Not a good thing. That almost got her arrested. And it came close to getting her killed, especially since she not only published 3 books about religion, was in fact the first Queen of England to publish books under her own name, but she also had books that were strictly forbidden. And these things came to light and came very close to her getting arrested and executed.
When religious conservatives like Bishop of Winchester Stephen Gardiner and Lord Chancellor and Earl of Southampton Thomas Wriothesley approached Henry with allegations of the Queen's supposedly heretical leanings, which appeared far more extreme than the Act of 6 Articles allowed, the king seemed fairly well disposed to entertain their suspicions. He even permitted Wriothesley to issue a warrant for her arrest and interrogation. Luckily for Catherine, the warrant was never served. The document was first waylaid by means of an unknown servant and delivered directly into Catherine's hands instead.
The Act of 6 Articles was basically 6 articles that were drawn up saying that even though the Church of England had broken from the Catholic Church, Catholic doctrine was still going to be the basis for it. So, like I said, Henry was willing to change things, but not too much. Now, Catherine knew she was in danger when she saw that warrant for her arrest. Luckily, she'd gotten her hands on it first, and she got the chance that Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard before her never had. She hadn't been arrested yet, so she had one more chance to talk to Henry. So she goes to him and basically says, darling, I'm sorry about these discussions with religion. Do they bother you? You know I only do it to distract you from the pain in your leg, right? So, I hope I'm not upsetting you. Well, Henry forgave her. Now, it's open for debate whether he let the arrest warrant fall into her hands as more of a warning, whether someone sympathetic to her cause let her get it first so that she would have this chance. Just who was playing who here is a topic of discussion, and we'll never really know the answer of did Henry just want her to be nice and submissive, or did she really win him over? Now, here's the thing about Catherine. Oh, I should probably add before I move on that actually people did come to arrest her after this, almost immediately after this, when she and Henry were out for a walk. And Henry told the people who came to arrest her basically to get lost, that there was no arrest warrant. In fact, he seemed to have forgotten all about it. Now, even though Catherine was up for reforming things and was trying to guide her husband's thinking, she was known to deeply believe a wife should be submissive to her husband. So she wasn't really all that modern of a woman. And now here's where things take another dark turn, and there's a major reason why I can't like Catherine Parr. Now, eventually, Henry died, she outlived him, and so she's free to do whatever she likes. And what she wants to do is marry Thomas Seymour, which she does. If there was one person in all of England even more sleazy than Henry VIII, it was Thomas Seymour. Now, Catherine Parr had been good friends with Catherine of Aragon, who was the mother of Mary the First. Now, she'd taken steps to reunite Henry with Mary, and after Catherine married Thomas Seymour, she invited Elizabeth to come live with them. Now, after Henry's death, of course, Edward, the son that he'd had with Jane Seymour, went on to become king. Now, at this point, nobody really expected Elizabeth would ever become queen someday. I mean, a woman ruling? That doesn't happen. So, Thomas Seymour didn't necessarily see Elizabeth as his ticket to being on a throne directly as a queen's consort, but he's still sister to the reigning king. And he was just a teenager at this time, Elizabeth was. And Thomas Seymour would walk in on her when she was just getting dressed for the morning. Now, I don't care today or back then, walking in on a teenage girl, not good. He would slap her private regions and tickle her when she clearly did not want to be tickled. He was being a complete pervert with her. Now, Catherine knew about this. And in fact, she was even with him in the room sometime while this was going on.
He flirted with the princess, who was just 13 and 14 years old at the time, coming into her room in his nightshirt to harass her before she was out of bed in the morning or only just up. Catherine's response was mystifying, for initially at least she colluded with Thomas, accompanying him into Elizabeth's room on some occasions, and even holding the girl in the gardens one day while Seymour cut her dress into pieces.
Okay, that is just plain wrong. Catherine may have acted like the ultimate pious woman, but if you're holding someone down while their dress is being cut away, that is just plain sick. Catherine played this off as, oh, Thomas is just joking with Elizabeth. He's just playing with her. There's nothing to it. Finally, it got so bad that Catherine sent Elizabeth away. It's debated whether she finally realized how bad things were, or whether she was just worried about the gossip going on, or what her real motivation was. But in any case, Elizabeth was finally sent where she was safe from Thomas. Catherine, meanwhile, became pregnant, and this was her fourth marriage and no children so far. So, of course, she was overjoyed about this. But the joy wasn't to last. Different sources debate how long she survived after giving birth to a little girl, but it was a matter of days. The little girl named Mary, I'll talk more about her shortly, but Thomas Seymour really didn't take an interest in his daughter. In fact, with his wife dead, he went to ask Elizabeth to marry him, and of course she told him, "Are you out of your mind? No way, not a chance." Well, Thomas Seymour was the definition of ambition, and he decided, why not just kill the king and take his throne? I can do that. So he went to King Edward's bedroom with the intent to kill him. And he would have succeeded, except Edward was sleeping with his dog, who barked and gave a warning and sacrificed himself to save Edward's life. Naturally, Thomas Seymour was not around long after this, was executed on Tower Hill, and that left Catherine's daughter Mary as an orphan. She was basically shuffled around relative to relative, but nobody wanted her because they considered her just another mouth to feed. You might think, well, given how rich her parents were, wouldn't she have anything? No, because Catherine had left everything to Thomas, and since Thomas was executed for trying to murder the king, all of his property went to the crown. It actually took an act of parliament to get any finances for Mary. But after that act was passed, she disappears from historical records. It's unknown what happened to her after that. But John Parkhurst, who was the chaplain to Catherine Parr, wrote a series of poems, and one of them in his collection is believed to give a hint as to Mary's fate, that she died at a very young age.
Reads, I, whom at the cost of her own life my queenly mother bore with the pangs of labour, sleep under this marble, an unfit traveller. If death had given me to live longer, that virtue, that modesty, that obedience of my excellent mother, that heavenly courageous nature, would have lived again in me. Now, whomever you are, fare thee well. Because I cannot speak any more, this stone is a memorial to my brief life.
This poem doesn't mention Mary by name, but there aren't a whole lot of candidates for who the queenly mother that this poem refers to could be. There's only two others. One of them being Jane Seymour, but she can't be the right candidate because the poem refers to a daughter, and Jane Seymour died giving birth to a son. The only other candidate was long before this time, and the poet would not have had an interest in writing about her. Also, given the fact that he was Catherine Parr's personal chaplain, it seems that he would be writing about her daughter. At the same time, the poem says Queen Lee, not necessarily my queen mother, my mother who was a queen. Historians continue to debate what happened to Mary. There are some even who claim she married. This is based on a claim someone made centuries later that they were her descendant, but it does not have any actual support from any evidence, and any records of Mary disappeared when she would have been about 2 years old. That's the last there's any mention of her. There is a book called The Secret Keeper by Sandra Bird. This is a historical novel written from the point of view of one of Catherine's ladies in waiting, and the book ends with her raising little Mary. Probably not true, but it's nice to think that maybe Mary did have some kind of happy outcome. One last note about Catherine Parr. It might be possible to meet her today, because her ghost is said to still haunt Sudley Castle where she died. This concludes my series of videos on the lives of Henry VIII. I will make future videos about Henry VIII and his children, but I don't want this channel to focus on only Tudor times, so I am going to try to vary it, but I will come back to this time period in the future. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, take care.